Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar today from Hype to Hands-On. It is putting AI, specifically ChatGPT and Copilot, to work in your insurance agency. My name is Casey Connors, and I am the Executive Director of the Agents Council for Technology, which is part of the Big I. So thank you very much to many of our members and partners in the audience today. And Kite is a very valued partner of ACT, as ACT is a neutral forum comprised of and supported by technology providers, carriers, industry groups, as well as agents. And our mission is to really help the independent agency channel embrace technology and encourage conversations, to execute their unique business strategies and encourage adoption of technology. So with that, I will turn it over to my friend and partner, Jason.
Thank you, Casey. And my name is Jason Goebel. I'm Chief Solutions Officer and one of the partners here over at Kite Technology Group. We do managed IT. We do agency consulting on AMS 360, on Applied Epic, on things like generative AI and things like that. Our focus has been specifically independent insurance agencies for the past 30-something years. I do have a PNC license out here in Arizona. My background is cybersecurity. Last couple of years, I've really been focusing on the AI train and getting people off of the sidelines, which is fundamentally what today's webinar is about. The agenda is pretty simple. We're going to do a little bit of a recap of what we've covered in past webinars. There's a QR code at the end. Like Casey mentioned, there are actually going to be two. Some for the stuff that's relative specific to this webinar, and then other stuff that's encompassing the bigger AI stuff that we do, both super full of good information. But today we're really going to be talking about building our digital colleagues. We call them agents, we call them GPTs, we call them a lot of things. I call them digital colleagues. That way we keep away from the specific terms, which we'll get into a bit, and then Q&A. So as we're going along, throw those questions in the Q&A box. Casey, if it's relative and it's right on time, feel free to interrupt me and shout it out. I'll stick around for the rest of the day if I have to. We'll get to all the questions, so don't even worry about that. Let me kick it off with understanding prompts and personas. Fundamentally, prompts and personas are the people, the colleagues that you're going to create, and then the actions that you're going to give the AI tool. So if you want ChatGPT or Copilot to write an article from the perspective of something, that something is going to be that persona. And those words matter because everything that generative AI does kind of hinges on those words and finding associations with other words. So to make that happen, we do a lot with what we call mnemonic frameworks. And so if you remember back in probably elementary school, maybe even as far back as kindergarten, when we were learning the order of the planets, many vigorous earthmen, jump straight, those mnemonics, they stick with us over the years. So the ones we like to use, we take a 4-step process. We use ROSES, the role, objective, style, expertise, and setting, to build out our persona. This is who the AI is going to be. And then we use PACE in our prompt design. We give it a purpose, we describe its audience, its context, and then we kind of fill it with some examples of things. That gets us the two pieces we need to execute a prompt. So we throw something at Copilot, we throw something at ChatGPT, it works its magic, and it gives us some output. We always want to fact check this stuff. We want to make sure it's logical. Does it align with what we were trying to accomplish? Because it's still not the human. And then address any gaps that it might have. And then finally, in that fourth piece of it, we want to refine that output. The most important thing, and the thing we often forget to do, in life as well, but that's a whole different story, is praise. We forget to tell Copilot and ChatGPT what it got right. So we automatically go to what's missing or what's incorrect. It's very important to tell it what it got right. Otherwise, it doesn't know. So when you ask it for a correction, it's going to start over and generate a whole new list of things, minus the one thing you did not like. So that part's really important. And then finally, you want to add it all together. There's a QR code that will allow you to download this interaction framework, and it'll give you some examples of some prompts and personas that we've built and given out. 6 in total. So keep your phones at the ready for that QR code. Of course, we're going to send this around as a recording as well. So you'll definitely get the information, rest assured. So what we're talking about today is, so we've taken those prompts, we've taken those personas, and we've built some pretty good things. Cool things are happening, but we want to codify these. We want to make them persistent and permanent. We want to be able to share them with our teams. Like, hey, I built this cool thing in ChatGPT. I'd like you to be able to take advantage of it in your work too. So for that, we're going to walk you through 6 digital colleagues that every team could be using right now, that could be taking advantage of right now. You can take what we've done here, modify them, expand on them, and you will immediately be off of the sidelines and using AI in your organizations. So we're going to walk you through that. So we're gonna build them. I'm going to show you how to build them. I'm going to show you where the words go, and then you're going to be able to share these things with your team. We're going to do it side by side and live, so hopefully it's going to be a good time. But my background is in cybersecurity, so here comes the obligatory discussion on data privacy. I'm going to assume that you guys have attended some of my other webinars, or if not, promise me you're going to, because I talk about a lot of this. So I'm going to make some assumptions here. I'm assuming you're using the paid versions of these products. So you have the end user licensing agreements, you've read them, you know the data privacy concerns, you've addressed them. I'm going to assume that because we're going to be talking about some non-public information that we're going to be sharing with the tools. I'm going to assume you have an acceptable use policy, and I'm going to assume your staff are trained. So we got the ground floor. Okay, cool. So I am going to dive right in with a combination of why data privacy matters, why reading the end user license matter, and our first prompt, which is a coverage comparator. So you got 2 policies, or you've got a policy and you've got a renewal, and you want to see how they stack up. You could read the thing, and you probably should to make sure, but let's say we do this a lot, and it would be really helpful to have a side-by-side comparison table, a gap list, bit of a client summary, some risk control suggestions if we have any, a standardized note so we could copy and paste it into our agency management system. That's always a good time. And any kind of red flags. I mean, it's not replacing our eyes on this thing, but it would be cool to have a second set of eyes to kind of review it and take a pass at it. So then you can kind of fact check it. Let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to show you first and foremost 2 versions of the same PDF. And this is kind of a lesson on data privacy, kind of a lesson on redaction and things like that. So I got 2 deck pages here. One is redacted, as you can see, and the other one is blacked out. This is markup. To the eye, you'd think they're one and the same, but under here, you can see there's a VIN number, and if I highlight, you can see I'm grabbing letter by letter. So I can copy paste this thing for sure and get to the data. If I bring this into ChatGPT or Copilot, it's also going to see that data. So, I did this by opening a PDF editing it, using the markup tools, and resaving it. That is not redaction. All of this stuff, these are letters that have been, recognized. OCR, optical character recognition. When I feed this thing into the AI, not only is it going to be able to, quote unquote, see the page, but it's also going to be able to read the letters underneath all of them. So you're going to need a tool like Adobe PDF Reader, or Acrobat, or Foxit Pro, Nitro. There are a bunch of tools, but if you're in the business of redacting data, you're probably going to need a tool other than Microsoft Paint to pull this off. So there's your warning. So we're going to use the redacted form of this for our demo today. So the way we build these things, I got all my ChatGPT stuff is going to be on the left. All of my Copilot stuff is going to be on the right. We're going to see which one breaks, and we're going to see which one's faster. As I was preparing for this, ordinarily ChatGPT is a lot faster. As I was preparing for this, I guess Copilot took note and it tripled the speed. So we'll see how that goes. But creating these things, pretty simple. In ChatGPT land, you click on Explore and you click on Create. And in Copilot land, you click on your sidebar and you click on Create Agent. And you'll see they produce a pretty similar screen. Now you can type some words and kind of describe it and what it's doing. The better way, in my humble opinion, is to jump on the Configure tab. So you're going to want to give it a name. In this case, we'd be calling it a coverage comparator. And I'm not going to put the instructions here yet because I want to talk through those. A description of what it does. It compares policies. The instructions are where our prompt is going to go. So we're going to dive back into the PowerPoint in just a second. Same thing here, name and description. You can give it a cool logo. That's cool. But the instructions are really what kicks it off. If you have some reference knowledge articles, some knowledge base articles, if you've got some qualifiers in terms of what good looks like, what policy coverages you recommend, stuff like that, you can attach files to these things to make them a little more intelligent. And then you've got some capabilities. We'll have to adjust some of these in some of our prompts too. In the interest of time, I have them all pre-built, so I'll kind of walk them through. Web search, canvas, image generation, code interpreter, and data analysis. You'll notice this is off by default. When you're creating a new GPT or Copilot, you're probably going to want to turn that on. This is the analytics brain. This is the numbers brain. And while we're not really crunching numbers when we're comparing policies, oftentimes you'll find that there are some errors because you don't have code interpreter and data analysis turned on. So you're always going to want to turn these things on. And then you can kind of start it with some conversation starters. They're optional. You can always just type words into the prompt. But if you find that you're starting off the same conversation, the same time, all the time, you can go ahead and create those prompts and stick them in there. So let's talk about the prompt itself. It looks really unimpressive on a page, I'll be honest, but I couldn't think of a way to show it to people without showing you the prompt. So I kind of want to walk through it. I'm not gonna read it word for word, but I want to describe what the prompt is doing. So in this coverage comparator, I'm giving it its persona. This is what you're doing for a US-based insurance agency. You could put all kinds of words in there and describing what your agency does, what your areas of expertise are. You can describe it to the end of the planet what good looks like there. So we're going to give it a task. We're going to compare two coverage sets. Could be two quotes, could be expiring, could be renewal. always return the results in the following order. And this is where we're being very detailed about what our output looks like. Because every time we feed it a policy, we don't want it to create from the ground up something new. We want something that we can rinse and repeat. So every time we want a comparison table, we want gaps, we want a client summary, we want that standardized note for our agency management system, any kind of red flags. So that's what we want our output to look like. You'll notice I have these in parentheses. This often helps the GPT or the Copilot know that I'm not asking for these specific words written on a page. I'm asking for the concept. A lot of times, if you don't annotate it in some way, every now and then it'll misunderstand the assignment and it'll and it'll just write the words. I have written 8 to 10 lines. So you don't want that. So putting it in parentheses sometimes helps. And then we're going to give it some rules. A line like for like coverage, call out deductibles and sublimits. If it's missing, mark it unknown, included in the red flags. Keep the tables concise and readable. You can get pretty prescriptive with your rules. I think the only warning there really is don't make a rule that countermands another rule. Gets a little confusing. So if you said do this, but don't do this, and they were the same, might confuse the AI. So that's the prompt that we put into here. And I created these coverage comparators side by side. So we're going to take 2 documents. We're going to take my quote that's redacted. We're going to slide them in here and let them upload. And we're going to do the same thing over here. It does take a second for them to upload, which is fine. So this one is ready to go. ChatGPT, I don't even have to give it any words. It'll take my prompt and it'll just run with it. Copilot, little different story. You'll see the go button isn't here because I haven't actually requested anything of it. So when I create my Copilot agents, um, I do add this suggested prompt. Start here, and then I do the thing. That's what you see here. So just for light, I'm going to type those words over here. Please compare these policies. And then I'm going to hit go. So it's going to take the 2 PDFs that I have. They're both redacted. One is a quote that I received, and one is the actual deck page, and it's going to compare the difference. One is a progressive quote. One is the Geico policy that we just reviewed. So, you'll see here's progressive quote, here's Geico quote, here's Copilot not being able to read the document. This is interesting. And this matters a lot because they don't read things the same way. So as you're thinking, do I use Copilot for these? Do I use ChatGPT? Do I do both? What does that look like? Let me show you what went wrong here. So here's our quote, and you can see I can highlight these words. This has been OCR'd. It was put through a scanner. It was produced by Acrobat or something. But anyway, somebody typed out the word JEEP, and the system can see that. Now let's look at the redacted quote that I have from Progressive. So this is just a scan. Notice that I can't highlight these words. Hasn't gone through any kind of optical character recognition. It looks obvious on the page. Clearly somebody didn't just dump this in a scanner from like 1904. This is a good scan, likely a print to PDF or something like that. But you'll see I can't grab these words, and neither can Copilot. So that's a challenge, and that's a limitation of where Copilot is today. So this is a good example of where ChatGPT might have an edge over on Copilot. So it's important to know as you're starting to play with these things and learn how these things can go wrong and why they can go wrong. This is a good example of that. Um, so in Copilot stuff, yeah, it still gives me what I asked for because I didn't say in my prompt, if you can't read it, just stop, just give up. I didn't tell it that. I said just do the thing. So that's what it did. Um, so likely this information is might be accurate, but not really useful because right there, I've got no deductible, no option A. Thanks for trying, I guess. But over here, because it was able to read the data, got a cool client summary, I got a standardized note, so I can copy paste this and drop it into my agency management system. Pretty cool. This shows me the gaps. Like one quote had a Hyundai and one did not. That's odd. You should confirm those things. So, as the agent, I gotta confirm and verify some things on this policy. And because these tools really like to help you, they're always going to provide, you know, follow-up questions. Do you want to do more? Do you want to do some other things? You can kind of take it any direction you want. If you find that you're choosing these things a lot, go back to your prompt and rewrite it and codify those in. So this is a good example of a fully functional comparator. It works in both, so long as you meet the requirement of making sure it's got a really good document to read from. So the next one, vendor risk assessment. Um, I get asked this a lot. Anytime I sit on a cybersecurity panel or I have a conversation about cybersecurity, we always talk about um, the requirements of doing due diligence on your third-party vendors. And the immediate response is always, okay, well, how do I know what to ask? Like, how do I know what am I supposed to be comparing? Due diligence on what exactly? So let's create um, let's create a GPT to do this, a copilot to do this. Let's create a digital colleague that's gonna it's gonna guide us through the process because we don't know what questions to ask. So I want Copilot and GPT to ask me some questions so that we can uncover what I'm supposed to ask. And along the way, rather than just checking boxes and going through an exercise, help me understand why these questions matter. And then ultimately, we want a checklist. So that's what I want this thing to do for me. I'm going to give it a vendor. I'm going to talk through it and um, show me why it matters along the way. So I'm going to learn some things and I'm going to get that checklist. Now, I wrote this prompt completely differently than the other prompt to show you how flexible prompt and persona creation can be. This one I just wrote in words, long form words. Act as a conversational guide. Help me build customized checklist, interview style process. Start by learning the vendor roles, why the topic matters, create a customized due diligence checklist. So I've kind of given it the marching orders there.
I'm just going to pop in because a couple people have asked some things in regards to the licensing. And if you're using ChatGPT Business, and just more clarification on paid and single subscriptions for those like at agencies that need multiple access points to their staff. Yeah, multiple of like if you're using ChatGPT for business, so like enterprise maybe, and then because I think that'll answer both of these questions in regards to people shouldn't be sharing logins.
You should not. Yeah. We've talked about this. So in these examples, I'm using ChatGPT for business and I'm using the $30 SKU of Copilot. Um, it it gets me a lot, but fundamentally what it does get me is as the business owner, as the business administrator, I can control the logins, I can control the interactions, and I can put safety guardrails around all of the users. So if you're just paying the $20 for the product, number one, you're not using a commercial end user licensing agreement. You're using a personal end user licensing agreement. Um, Fundamentally different. They might make similar promises, but how they execute and validate those promises fundamentally different. So if you read the end user licensing agreement, you'll see the differences there. But I think Chat GPT for Business is the bare bones minimum there. And you can buy, I believe the minimum is 3 licenses at $20 per user per month. So still very, very affordable. Enterprise gets you more controls, more granular aspects. Um, it's not, last time I checked the price, it wasn't a whole lot more. So, if you're doing 3 to 5, I think ChatGPT for Business is fine. If you're looking at scaling this out to an entire organization, enterprise probably makes the most sense.
I
Yep.
think that answers, Tim, let us know if that answers your question. And then Steve, I think this would be just one other good point to add in here because Steve is asking about, can we really be sure that our clients or agencies' data is really secure?
No, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but that's kind of the reality of it. And let me kind of take a step back from that. You have a credit card. Has that credit card company ever had a breach? Yeah. You have a credit score. Has Experian ever had a breach? Yeah. You use Microsoft 365 for your business email. Has Microsoft ever had a breach? Yeah. The FBI and CIA protect this country. Have they ever had a breach? Yeah. So, um, can you ever be 100% stack of Bibles positive that none of this is going to go wrong? No, 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 you can't. Um, even even though we try, even though we do all the right things, even though we put all the guardrails in place, threat actors have nothing but time. And if we have a tool that works for good, they have an equal tool that works for bad. But it's not constrained by morals or any kind of ethical guidelines. So they have a competitive edge in a lot of these cases. I think the question you have to come to terms with is, did you perform the due diligence? Did you reach a level of comfort that, the juice is worth the squeeze, but we're doing this in a manner that honors our clients, that solves our business problems, that puts us in a place where we need to be, and the risk is worth it. And I think if you do that and you're buying the licenses, you're reading the end user licensing agreements, you understand the risk, you've got ownership and leadership on board, you've got IT and security in lockstep with you. Um, I think you've done everything you can to make sure that you're reasonably secure. Um, that being said, things happen. So 100% no, but I feel very confident making business decisions around this technology. Year and a half, 2 years ago, might have had a different opinion. OpenAI had some growing up to do. Microsoft Copilot didn't add enough value at the time. I think it's changed, and it's moving in the right direction. These are companies that have demonstrated mature growth and are doing good things. So in terms of a risk assessment, I've done my risk assessment and I've arrived at the conclusion that it's worth it for me. And that's the task at hand. You got to do that for you and your clients and be a good steward. Did that answer that one?
Yes, perfect. Thank you so
I
much.
did see another comment show up in the Q&A. Jenny said she's uploaded like PDFs and handwritten
Yeah.
notes, and Copilot was able to read them. That is a true statement. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. Ultimately, it all depends on how the PDF was created. And I don't I don't think we're in a good position to know like when it does what it does, why does it do it? So there's a testing phase and a process, but I think once you land on a process that gets you PDFs that make sense, and once you're aware of what to keep your eyes out for, I think you're in a really good spot. it'll just look a little different for, the tool stack will look a little different for different folks. So let's put this vendor thing to the test. So because it's live and because it does some things, um, I couldn't really start it with anything other than to say something like, uh, help me review my VoIP phone provider. And I don't want to bore you with the details because I'm going to give you the prompt. I say play with it on your own time, but you'll see how it starts the process. Um, the important thing in this in the prompt that I'll go back to in just a second. Um, this is really kind of a creature comfort in my opinion. But when I write these prompts, I always tell it to ask one clear question at a time. If you don't tell it specifically to ask one clear question at a time, it'll give you 3 to 5, and it's fine. I mean, you can answer all of the questions, but the running joke is if you ask a guy 2 questions, you get one answer. Um, there's some truth to that. Anybody who's married can confirm. Um, so I like to do that. It keeps it on the guardrails. It keeps the conversation nice and concise, and it makes sure that we're doing one thing at a time, and we're building out, an iterative chain of events with no ambiguity. So, now we have an answer. It's going to ask some things. What kind of data does your VoIP provider handle? Um, this one is different. What's the name? And what do you primarily use them for? So you can see there's already some difference in the generation of what the AI tools are doing. But you can kind of run through this, and I mean, this will give some examples here. Let's see what it does with that. And let's copy that guy and let's give it to ChatGPT. So, it'll continue down, and it'll ask ultimately somewhere between 3 to 5 to 6 questions before generating that checklist and um, giving you that answer of here's what I need to be asking of Ring Central when it comes to these things. So that's pretty cool. And then you can kind of kick that over to your IT provider and say, hey, I need some help with this. I need you to answer some questions on this, or open up a support ticket with Ring Central and say, I'm doing my annual due diligence on all of our vendors. I need you to account for these things. So it gets you moving forward in a pretty cool direction. That way you can kind of internalize that vendor review process. The question I always get along those lines are our carriers vendors? I think so. It's not clear cut in the sense that I'm taking my data and I'm putting it somewhere else. Like when I'm working with Progressive or Travelers, this is data that we own together. It's a Travelers policy, so technically it's their data first. But I do think it's important for us to know. Um, while the Chubbs and the Travelers and the Hartfords of the world, those are obvious answers. They have due diligence packages that they just hand you. Applied Systems, Vertafore, same thing. They've put it all in a pretty little bow. If you ask for it, they give it to you. It's pretty simple. But some of those smaller regional carriers, maybe that's a conversation worth having as you explore a relationship with them. At the very least, now you've got a tool to make that an easy process. The next one, loss runs analyzer. We run into this a lot. We use this a lot. People throw us loss runs, and it's like, okay, I can read loss runs. I know you had a slip and fall. I know you had this. But I always think, well, summary metrics, incident table, top causes. Do we have any outliers? I like risk control suggestions. It's like, okay, you got all these losses. How do we stop this? That's my job to get you in a better place with less claims. So I always look for like risk control suggestions, um, mitigation, packages, stuff like that. So let's see what a prompt like that looks like. So, we kind of start with the basic thing, here's who you are, here are your tasks. This is what we want your output to look like. Clear headings, summary metrics, incident table, insights, risk controls. You could even add, I would like an executive summary. I would like this, I would like that. You can add anything you want to kind of customize these things to how you talk with insureds, how you talk with prospects, how you educate them on risk mitigation. Again, that standardized note because we always want to drop it into our agency management system. Um, and then some rules. So the rules I gave this thing: never fabricate claims. Sounds obvious, but I've seen it happen. So I always like to put those guardrails in place. Um, don't make assumptions, don't make fabrications, don't do any of this. If data is missing, just say it's missing, say it's unknown. Uh, because these tools are designed to generate things, um, they seem to have a built-in aversion to generating nothing. So you got to kind of tell it, like, unknown is fine. Unknown is totally fine. In this case, in these rules, I gave it, normalized dollar amounts, normalized dates, because a lot of what these prompts do is, you know, copy and paste into other systems. So I have to align the data output with systems that the others can read. And any kind of outliers, claims that are, larger than you would expect. So let me show you what that looks like in practice. So here we go. We got our loss runs analyzer. Um, I do have a redacted loss run that I'm going to throw up here. It is a properly redacted loss run, and it's not complete. It's just a couple of pages.
Thanks. And on that note, because we did have a question specifically to redaction of
Mhm.
from Amanda, do you redact everything you upload into ChatGPT?
I do on demos, sure. At least I try. Um, Ultimately, you're gonna have to make peace with that. You certainly can. It's safer that way. At some point, you do need to decide, and this will come out in your acceptable use policy when you write it for your agency, when you train your folks on it. You're gonna have to train them what is okay to put in there and what is not. Maybe client names are not. Maybe policy numbers are not. Um, it's going to look different for every agency, based on the security, based on the controls, based on the familiarity, and frankly based on the risk tolerance. Um, while my end user licensing agreements, my EULAs, they say this data is safe. I'm not using fly by night companies right here. I'm using the arguably the best and the brightest companies out there to get this done. There's always a little bit of risk. So um, I say start with redaction, and at some point, um, you have to make a decision, because if you're hiding the data, if you're not sharing the data, there's a lot of insight that you can't get, and there's a lot of consideration that you won't arrive at, because you didn't give it enough data. So if I'm hiding certain things or redacting certain things, Copilot's only going to be able to give me insight onto what I give it. So, you know, book a business report as an example. That's got a ton of data in it. I have a sample that I'm gonna show, but that's a lot of data, a lot of policy numbers in one place, a lot of trust. And I have to get there, and I have to get there responsibly, and I have to make peace with that. But the answer is going to be a little different, for every agency. Um, there are some people that will never get there. They're like, we just won't use generative AI for any of these things. So you've got a lot of lenses that you can see it through, but ultimately it comes down to an informed business decision for sure. I think we're personally don't take this as permission to avoid the steps of arriving at your own conclusions. Um, I do run into agencies that don't redact data when they throw it into Copilot. They have Copilot linked to their SharePoint sites, to their OneDrive sites, and they'll throw client data in there all the time. Um, but they've gone through a process of Copilot readiness and adoption, and they've tuned their Microsoft 365 environment so that they've given Copilot some really good guardrails. So I think if you're going the unredacted route, that's Copilot is obviously the safer of the two, in my humble opinion. Um, Even though I favor ChatGPT, I like the words, I like the tone that it uses from a hey, can I have your serial number perspective? Hey, can I have your social security number perspective? I I trust Copilot a little more. So throw my loss run in here, and it's done some things. You saw that file initially errored out. Sometimes that happens. I think it was because I was trying to send the file two places at one time, and that doesn't always work. But you'll see it did what was required, what was asked of it. Summary metrics, incident table, insights, risk controls, standardized note, red flags. So pretty cool stuff. Of course, the caveat is don't just blindly trust this stuff. You got to read it, you got to understand it, you got to make sure it's accurate at least. Um, but that's a pretty good list of things that you can kind of fact check and review, and some risk controls. These are good ideas. You can now take something like that and say, well, hey, while we're on the subject, can you create me a slip and trip prevention plan that I can give to my client for a 30-day adoption? Sure. Um, a lot of cool options in here in terms of what we can do. If you've got a lot of handling and ergonomic type of claims, maybe you need a plan, maybe you need a strategy for what that looks like. And these tools can then help you create those. So now we're in the business of not just analyzing the loss runs, but hey, while we're here, let's make your future state better. So that's pretty cool stuff. So the next one is a policy explainer. And I guess that's pretty self-explanatory. Every now and then I get some stuff and I'm like, yeah, what is this stuff? Just bottom line it for me. That's the big phrase around here. Is like, what's the bottom line? So what we want out of this guy, I want to be able to just throw it a document, throw it an email, throw something. Just give me a plain language summary, maybe a coverage table, some kind of example scenarios of what it looks like, some ambiguities if there are things. Basically, this is my uh, what is this thing? This is really cool if you're first starting out in insurance. Maybe you don't have years under your belt or something like that. This is a good way to just kind of bottom line the coverage. And the prompt is pretty simple. We follow the same thing here. We give it a task, and we want output with clear headings: summary, coverage table, examples, ambiguities. And again, we have some guardrails. Do not add facts beyond what's in the text. Don't make stuff up. If it's missing, say unknown, ambiguities. That's perfectly okay. And let me show you what that looks like. So in this case, we're going to go back to our handy dandy redacted for real policy. And I'm going to pause for a second to let it upload this guy so I don't make a mess. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. And again, I have to give Copilot some words, so I'm off and running. Now, this is an interesting one with a little bit of a, let me check my clock because I'm going to give you a little insight guideline. You see what's happening here. Whereas Copilot has just jumped in. This is GPT-5 in action. You used to have GPT 3.5 and then 4.0 and 4.1 and 4.5, and you had a bunch of others that you hadn't even heard of. And GPT-5 was an effort to make all of those available to you without having to choose them specifically because they were trained on different things. Like 4.5, great with words. 4.0 mini, super lightweight. Turbo, super lightweight. Some of the threes were specifically designed for data analytics. So what you see here is that ChatGPT 5 um, read some of the words that I had put, and it decided it needed to engage its analytics GPT model in the background. Really delays the process, but you'll see, it'll show you exactly what it's doing and why it's doing it. Every now and then you'll see Copilot do the same thing because it's also using GPT-5 on the front end. But while that does its thinking, so we've got our summary, we've got our coverage table, got our examples. These are some client facing things like, hey, if you drove this car into a ditch, this is what it would look like. If you rear-ended $1 million Ferrari, this is what it would look like. Your ambiguities. I put in there a client safe blurb just to see what it would do. If a client was like, "Hey, what does this policy mean? What's the reality of it?" Could I give it to the tool and then the tool summarize and bottom line it in a way that's accurate and factual, so I could just give it back to the client and say, "Hey, this is what it looks like." Yeah, you'll see the same thing. Um, ChatGPT finally caught up here. Client safe blurb, stuff like that. So pretty cool. So the next one, little disappointing. I can't show you the prompt because the prompt is 3 pages long and it's very specific to the agency management system. If you want to contact me afterwards and say, "Hey, I'm using this agency management system or I'm using that information," I'll share with you the proper prompt. I'm not trying to hide it, just I could not fit it on the screen. But I really wanted to show you what it could do. And here's an interesting thing. So I'm going to throw this book of business report in here. I'm going to see what it does with it. It's going to take a second to upload. There we go. I'm going to put it in Copilot. And so we go back to always the question of, do I use Copilot? Do I use ChatGPT? Which one should I invest in? This is one. I built these things. I built the agent and the GPT with the exact same prompt. And I've done this the whole time. Every single prompt we've seen here is universal. I didn't change them at all because I wanted a true shootout. This prompt in ChatGPT land always breaks, and it has something to do with the way that Copilot is processing the spreadsheet. So what I've learned in this process is that Copilot is very good at just taking the whole spreadsheet and consuming it, and you'd think that makes sense because Copilot's a Microsoft product, Excel's a Microsoft product, so there's an edge there. But you'll see it gives you an executive summary, totals in force, line of business, carrier, producer, renewal pipeline. So pretty cool little stuff. Meanwhile, Copilot's still or ChatGPT still kind of doing its thing, and you'll see it's taking apart the the fields, the maps, all the things, and it's building a structure, it's building some plans. So you can see why this prompt is a pretty significant monster on the back end. But really wanted to show you this because I wanted to show you that it's possible. So while it's cool that we have dashboards in our agency management systems, and they're really useful and they provide some stuff, but if we want very specific questions like, "Hey, what should I be looking for? What should I do this? Or what does my pipeline look like? What should I concentrate on?" you know, in my samples here, it kind of warned me that I had a substantial amount of premium renewing in the next 120 days, and a lot of it was with one carrier. I'm like, oh, that's good to know. I like that. Um, this thing is going to continue to try and build itself into a wall. In my testing, it never made sense of it. So now I'm going to take it apart and I'm going to see if I can get it running to some degree. But if you want the Copilot book of business prompt, happy to happy to give it to you. I already see the obvious questions. How do you redact book of business reports, and if so, how? Um, there is so much data in there. I don't think that you could redact it easily. Excel um, does have a function where you can write a function to randomize and seed a cell so that the data is automatically replaced with something else. I think by the time you're done with that, I don't know that you're going to have a useful output, and I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of juice for the squeeze. I think if you're at the point where you're throwing books of business reports at Copilot, you've really made peace with the data privacy aspect of it. You've done the due diligence, you've tuned your tenant up, you know it's as secure can be, and then you're ready to proceed. Because I mean, the book of business is kind of the heart and soul of what we do. So that's pretty significant one. This one, I gotta be honest, I don't know if it's good or bad. I need you guys to tell me. Um, I asked ChatGPT what would be useful because I was curious what it would answer, and I built a prompt in a persona that mimics an agency, and specifically the operations manager of an agency. And I asked it, I'm like, hey, if I'm building things for you, what would be useful to you? And it said an intake validator. I'm like, really? Okay, let's try it. So the concept behind this intake validator is I can throw anything at it and it'll attempt to normalize and explain what it is and what might be missing. So it goes through a process of identifying, like, what is the thing we're doing, and um, and what it looks like. So, same thing. I gave it a category, some standardized notes, missing info. Um, I'll show it to you real quick because it does work. Um, is it useful? I don't know. So I'm gonna give it that same redacted um, deck page that I've been working off of. And my upload is just a tad slow there. There we go. So it does work. Um, I don't know. I need you guys to tell me, is this cool? Is ChatGPT just blowing some smoke? I don't know. I wanted to give it to you. You guys try it. You let me know what you think. I liked the output. I thought it was pretty cool. I liked the concept of, like, what did I just throw it? Well, I threw it an auto policy renewal. Gave me a standardized note. It called out my redacted information. This is kind of cool. I could maybe see how this could be useful. So you guys give that one a go. Wrapping up, prompts and personas, kind of the cornerstone of any nutritional breakfast. Those are your ingredients. You get good with prompts and personas, you're gonna get good with GPTs and Copilot agents, and you're gonna build great things. As always, the tools, they help. They're not the strategy. They're not replacing the humans. The risks of AI, very real, but I think very manageable. But that's a question that you guys have to answer for yourselves, for your clients, for your agencies. Um, me, I think it's worth it. Here's your first QR code. These are the downloadable guides. This is the prompt sample for this session. The frameworks, the AI for prompts and personas. You'll also be able to get the webinar recording once we're finished with it on this guy. And the next one is your AI marketing toolkit from the Big I. Um, and acceptable use policies. So if you don't have one, thank you, Big Eye. They're doing you a solid. Big Eye's doing a ton of things with like an AI podcast series and stuff like that. They've done webinars as well. Um, so pretty cool. I'm going to hit you up with both of them there. I encourage you to visit Axe website. They're doing a lot of cool stuff in the space. If you want to get in touch with me, if you want to get in touch with my team, you can always schedule a meeting with us. We'll have a good conversation. We got some questions here.
Yeah, we have a couple of you did kind of touch on this, but just to reiterate from Paige, if you're using something like Copilot instead of ChatGPT, is that more protected? So if you upload redacted documents, are they more protected?
On paper, no, they're not. The end user licensing agreements, when you read them, they both promise to treat your data with privacy and care. They do. They absolutely do. You have to look at a company like OpenAI versus a company like Microsoft. Microsoft is huge. They've been around for a long time. They don't move quickly. OpenAI is just kind of exiting its startup phase. They move fast, they break things. That's part of the culture in some cases. Um, so you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons. In my opinion, I think with the right licensing, with the right due diligence, with the right care and understanding, I think you can arrive at at a place of comfort on either one. Uh, Copilot does have an edge in terms of visibility because it's tied to all the other things that Microsoft is already doing for you. And because it already has access to a lot of that data that lives in your tenant, I think that's a safer play. So, again, I use ChatGPT for creating content. I like the words, I like the paragraphs, I like how it puts those things together. When it's hardcore data, when it's structure and stuff like that, I think Copilot does have a bit of an edge.
And then from Kate, do you have a thread of each client in your AI of choice? I'm curious to how you organize your accounts to stay focused, i.e. client renewal updates, etc.
Ooh, that's a tough because organization was not the cornerstone of any of these tools. Um, so ChatGPT does have its project folders and it has some stuff there, but you'll notice after you've used it for a long time, it's really unwieldy. I would not really consider it the source of truth like I would an agency management system. I I have to give the Copilot the major edge there because when you build these Copilot agents, you can tie them to SharePoint sites. So within your SharePoint site, you list your clients, you list your data structure, you build your data structure, and you store all your stuff there. And then you tell Copilot, hey, here's my data source. This is what my data structure looks like. Now we're coloring inside of the lines. I think Copilot is leaps and bounds ahead of the curve when it comes to turning these things up to 11 and really building processes like that. When I do it in ChatGPT, I have to use other tools to put it together. Like, hey, pull it from SharePoint, bring it into here, do the things, put it back into SharePoint. So, Copilot wins in my opinion.
And then Tim is asking, do you recommend incorporating JSON to improve the accuracy?
Yes. It's JSON, not Jason.
Correct.
No, so JSON is a structured framework of putting things together. Kind of like XML, kind of like HTML. It's basically building a scaffolding and saying this is what output is going to look like. It's going to look like X, Y, Z, but not using words, using a physical structure. It uh, that's like a 301 course, but yes, putting in a JSON scaffolding into your prompts really drives towards nice consistent output. Absolutely. Both Copilot and ChatGPT support JSON scaffolding. Um, if you'd like to see an example of what a good JSON scaffold looks like, hit me up. I'm happy to show you one. but it would take me an hour to in a completely different webinar to kind of explain, what that is, how to modify it, how to pick it apart. But in the output of the examples I used of hey, I want a summary table, I want rules, I want observations, I want red flags. You can actually write all of that into a JSON structure that you can kind of copy paste. Yeah, excellent question. I love it.
So final
Love it.
question, relative to policy comparisons, are these tools effective in comparing full policy body language?
Yes, surprisingly and fascinatingly, yes. Do they get it wrong from time to time? Yeah, but so do our people. So, but yeah, it's awesome. I will throw you one little tiny curveball since hey, you brought it up, it's not my fault. Um, so we've talked about Copilot, we've talked about ChatGPT. There's another player out there called Claude, Claude, and it's put out by the third big pillar of AI, Anthropic. Um, Claude, as a large language model, was purpose built to do that kind of work. It's fantastic with computer programming. It can build your JavaScript. It can build your JSON structures. It's very good with that. Recently, Microsoft has worked out a deal so they can use Anthropic's Claude engine inside of custom Copilot agents built with Copilot Studio. So you're going to see that coming. So that's a little bit of the curveball. So just hear those words and keep an eye on that prize because Claude really does a fantastic job of taking massive commercial policies and kind of truncating that, simplifying it, and explaining it with a high degree of accuracy. Yes. Not saying ChatGPT and Copilot are bad at it. They're very good at it. But when you're talking 90% accuracy relative to 93% accuracy, that really matters. Or 95 to 97% accuracy. That really matters. And that's a level of difference that's super important.
Well, thank you very much. We have had some great kudos come into in the Q&A, that this has been very helpful, great useful information. We appreciate your partnership and sharing this advice as everyone dives in more on their AI journeys at their agencies to help with their operational efficiency and business. So thank you for joining us very much, Jason. Thank you everybody here in attendance. Please do check out the resources from Kite, as well as please engage with the Big I and ACT to check out any more of our AI resources, webinars, or join a work group to access the conversations. So thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us.